Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show, and it's time for a movie review. Last night, me and my wife went to see the movie Bob Marley One Love, only in theaters. We love going to the theater, and we saw the movie last night, and here's going to be the review. Now, I'm a Bob Marley fan. I'm not a big expert on him, but what do I got? 13 of his albums, as you could see, deluxe edition of Catch a Fire, deluxe of Exodus, Burnin', Natty Dread, the live album, which is incredible, Kaya, special edition, Babylon by Bus, the double gold collection, a bootleg at the record plant, and some more compilations, Legend that everybody's got, and some other really deeper ones that are really cool. I'm definitely a fan of Bob Marley. In fact, I'm a fan of reggae music. And of course, he was the biggest reggae star, the ambassador of reggae music, biggest export from Jamaica. So I was really looking forward to this movie. It stars Kingsley Best Adair. He plays Bob Marley, does a wonderful job, very believable. And then Lashana Lynch, she plays Rita Marley, also wonderful job, very believable. They were terrific in their representation of Bob and Rita Marley. The movie's a little bit strange. It's a biopic, but it's not one of those linear ones where it starts as his beginning. It actually opens up circa around 76 where, there's a terrible, basically, it's like a civil war going on in Jamaica between these two warring parties that have leaders, and then there's like gangs under it and almost like mafia level where they're killing people and fighting back and forth, and they're trying to convince Bob Marley to perform at a peace concert to promote peace and calm the situation in Jamaica between these two warring factions. And he's going to do it. And then, and this is all true, if you know some Bob Marley stories, literally like a couple of nights before, the assassins break into his compound in Jamaica, and he gets shot. Rita Marley gets shot in the head, and I think one or two other members of the band get shot. None of them are killed, thankfully. And what's going to happen is Marley actually does go to this performance and performs. In fact, famous scene, he opens up his shirt and he shows the bullet hole in his arm and in his chest as well. They all survive and they do perform at this concert, which is pretty incredible. And then from there, Marley says he's going to go to the U.S., and then he sends Rita and the kids to go to the U.K. No, actually backwards. Rita's going to go to the U.S. with the kids where it's safer. Marley's going to go to the U.K. and try to really expand his career internationally. Most of the movie's focusing on Exodus. A lot of people think it's his best album. And they actually quoted a movie. Time magazine says it's the greatest album of the century or something like that. And then the movie goes from there. He's going to tour Europe, and they have a couple of, recreations of concert scenes, which was a bit much with all these young people screaming and going crazy. A little bit different when you really look at the real footage from Marley Live. But certainly, he was really taking off in the UK and Europe, and then eventually going to play the US. It hints on some other things, issues with his manager, Don Taylor, and some financial discrepancies, and Marley gets physical with him. Apparently, in real life, it was actually much worse than what they did in the movie. Remember that when I read the book. And then it touches on what happens to him. Now, my wife, for instance, had no idea, so I don't want to do a spoiler, but that Bob Marley's deceased. And it starts with a toe injury when he's playing a fun game of soccer. And turns out he has like melanoma. So then later on it shows him returning to Jamaica as like a conquering hero. And it's kind of like, and it goes back and forth. So it's not linear. It has some flashbacks. And basically the movie goes real fast. It's like 90 minutes. So it reminded me of like if you watch like Lifetime Cable, a really quick biopic, they would call this. But it doesn't go in depth. So if you are a Bob Marley fan, this is kind of like the intro to Bob Marley and some highlights, not in any particular order. And it does end where he does this One Love concert. It's really famous where he brings the leaders of the two factions in Jamaica onto the stage and they shake hands. Michael Manley being one of them. I forgot the other guy's name. And that's kind of like the final reel at the end. But of course, there's a lot more to his story that they only hint on. So let me go to some of the negatives that really kind of bothered me. Well, for one thing, Bob Marley is half white, half black. A lot of people probably don't realize his father was white, but he never knew his father. His father left like when he was right after he was born. So he was slowly brought up without knowing his white father. Throughout the movie, there's this recurring theme of this guy on a horse who you think is his father, that he's always searching for his father. I'm not sure if it was father. I actually don't think it was his father. I think it was like part of Rastafarianism, but I'm really not sure, and it really doesn't spell it out that well. I found that a little bit confusing, but this recurring theme, and then it really doesn't go into at all Rastafari. And when you listen to Bob Marley speak, and even in the end of this movie, he's doing a good impersonation of him. All the reggae guys. I remember watching. There was This Is Rockers, which is a soundtrack album, but there used to be a TV show called Rockers. Rockers 80 it was, I remember watching. They had Mick Jagger and Keith Richards on once. I couldn't understand a word that they were saying. Oh, you would always pick up, they go, Rastafari, man, Rastafari. And I'm like, they don't dig into the religion really at all, very much. And obviously, a lot of it is about smoking herb. So they really don't touch on that much, and the dreadlocks, they don't really go into that at all. But I guess it's a story of Bob Marley, so you don't need to. But it would have been good. It's really Rita Marley's movie. I know that she's an executive producer amongst any, and she's such a strong character in this movie. To me, she's as strong a character as Bob Marley in the movie, which I don't think is really accurate. She's just a rock, and you see that he leans on her a lot, and she's the sage with the great advice and trying to guide Bob Marley. And I don't really know how accurate that is. They have such a strong relationship in the movie. Now, if you know anything about Bob Marley in real life, which they don't really talk about in this movie, Bob Marley had at least 8 kids from all these different women. He was a major philanderer. He certainly didn't have a monogamous relationship with Rita. And Rita didn't with him, because from my understanding, if I remember right from the book I read, I think she had like 3 kids from outside Bob Marley also. So they had this compound with all these kids, but it's all from different people. The movie, at one little section, kind of hints at infidelities, but it doesn't expand on that. They really presented at this amazing relationship, which, it was clearly a very open relationship. And I'm not judging him, but it's definitely misleading, in my opinion, in the movie. Another big factor that really all lost in the movie is Chris Blackwell. So Bob Marley is, another reggae artist, and he's young, with originally the Wailing Wailers, which has a different sound, and they do touch upon that a little bit in the movie, where they show a Jamaican studio. But it was this guy, Chris Blackwell, from Island Records, who really goes down and discovers Bob Marley and makes him international. And Chris Blackwell is in the movie just in little bits and pieces. They just say Chris. They never say who he is, what his role is, and how important he is. If it wasn't for Chris Blackwell, it doesn't matter how great Bob Marley is, he never would have got discovered really outside. No matter how good somebody is, you need that presence. You need somebody to believe in you. You need somebody who's going to put the money behind you and a record company and put you out there to the world, which Chris Blackwell did, and in a great way. And he certainly doesn't get the credit in the movie. You're like, who is this guy? I knew who he was, but most people aren't going to know. Thankfully, he comes off as a nice guy and not just like some record company guy who's abusing somebody. But even so, he's a really important figure in the life of Bob Marley and making him successful. No mention of Eric Clapton in 1974 doing a cover of I Shot the Sheriff. That was a big deal, because in 1974, Bob Marley still really wasn't very well known, and Eric Clapton made that song a #1 hit, and that helped expose Bob Marley as well. So, and one other thing that I will tell you that I really can't stand if you're going to do a biopic, then make it accurate and really tell the story. You don't have to go into details on everything. But, when I see a movie that says based on a true story, that means 90% of it is false and there's a little fraction. And, like, for instance, there's a scene in the movie, when Bob Marley, they break into the house and they're going to assassinate him and they shoot Rita Marley and the band members. There's a scene in the movie at the end where he returns to Jamaica, goes back to his compound, and the guy one of the guys who shot Bob Marley, well, this is the guy who actually did shoot Bob Marley, is in the kitchen, walks into the kitchen, sees Bob Marley, and is asking for forgiveness. And, Bob Marley is like, yeah, man, no hard feelings kind of a thing. It's fine. I forgive you kind of a thing. If the book that I had read, my understanding is they caught the three guys. They went and got Bob Marley and his manager, and they brought them to the location where the three guys were in front of Bob Marley and his manager, and they hung two of the guys while they were alive, hung them to death, and the other guy they shot in the head right in front of Bob Marley and the manager. Very different ending than what they show in the movie. Bob Marley is an amazing talent. He's one of my favorites. A true legend that's not overrated at all. But you don't have to turn him into that saintly figure, I forgive you, when the reality of what happened, not from Bob Marley necessarily, is very different. Just tell the damn story. That's what I would have liked. Overall, it could have done so much more. You get a taste of the dangerousness in Jamaica, of Kingston when Marley was there and he left, but they could have gone into so much more detail. And certainly the ending of Bob Marley's life, they really don't go into much at all, except basically they write, he passed away from melanoma cancer. They could have, he fought it for years and went through radiation and that kind of stuff. And I think that would have been even important to see. And they just whitewashed all of that as well. So, mixed feelings. So here's the thing. If you're not a big Bob Marley fan, you know a couple of his songs. It's a good movie. My wife liked it. She didn't love it, and she didn't know much going in. If you're somebody who knows his story, or a lot of it, or really knows his music, you really only get a taste of only a small fraction of his music. It was a good scene when they're in the studio, I guess in Los Angeles, I think, or maybe in the UK with Chris Blackwell, and they're working on Exodus, and they're trying to come up with like the drum riff of Jammin', and that was a good scene. But overall, out of a 5 being a classic and a 1 being terrible, I'd give it a 3 for good. It was okay. A lightweight TV movie. They could have done so much more with it. So that's it. If you've seen One Love, let me know your opinions, what you think about my review, what you think about Bob Marley. Who doesn't love Bob Marley? I don't know. Anyway, as always, I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much for checking in. Have a great week coming up, and I'll see you next time on the Alan Rosenberg Show.